Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for welcoming us, for joining us on this webinar hosted by Prosper Squared. My name's Lisa Karen. I'm the Community Engagement Director here for Prosper Squared. For those of you who don't know us, we are a business club and rewards programme for small business owners and entrepreneurs. If you'd like to know more about that, feel free to message us on LinkedIn. But other than that, we won't be doing any hard sell today. So I'm excited to welcome two illustrious speakers today. We have Dave Verburg, who's a strategic business growth and personal coach. And his approach is very much aligned to what we believe and what we like to bring forth at Prosper Squared, in that it's not just about work, it's about actually creating a lifestyle that you enjoy and that's worthy, and that really your business is the means to the end, not the end goal itself. And we also have Sue, who is my colleague. Sue G is the Business Development Director here at Prosper Squared, and she has a couple of decades of experience in coaching, training and development, having run her own company here locally in the Isle of Man for 17 years and done a lot of international work as well. I've been lucky enough to be trained by Sue in the past, but also enjoying the benefits of someone that's actually been coached by her. And she turned out to be the best person I've ever worked with before. So I put some of that down to Sue's coaching. So I think we're going to get some great nuggets off these guys today. We expect the session to be about 40 minutes. So they're going to chat through various questions for 30 minutes, and we should have a good 10 minutes for questions. But please feel free to start putting questions on in the chat box now or whenever they come to you. If you could select panelists and attendees, everyone will be able to see your questions. Hopefully we will answer them all. We'll certainly attempt to, but please do take this opportunity. We will be putting the session out on YouTube later so you can recap. But I think that's about it from me. So without further ado, let's pose the first question. So guys, what are your thoughts on goal setting in general?
Go on, Sue.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yes.
The first point for mine is goal setting is paramount. Yeah, whether you're talking personal or business, goal setting can be very different, which no doubt we will talk about as we go through here. But if you have no goal, and that doesn't matter whether it's a touchy-feely subject or a hard targeted subject, is that if you're not clear on what you're trying to achieve, then it's very difficult to actually get there. So my first point, I think, would be is make certain it's real. Dave, over to you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've got a couple of caveats around that. One, I would say, is they're often misunderstood, and by that I mean we'll talk about this a bit later on about different methods of setting goals, and people get stuck into one method and think it's the method and it's the method, and it just isn't. It's a method, which is cool. And of course, we're talking about SMART today, you know, those specific, measurable, attainable, relevant and time-bound stuff, but more about that later. Most people's brains don't work that way, so that's not the best way to set goals for everyone. Some things, I believe, should be a way of living and not really have goals set around them. So things like finances and health, you should be looking at ways to be financially clever and sound and bright anyway, without having to set a physical goal around it. It should just be a way of life, and it's the same about your health. So health and fitness goals, I think, are just things that the aim should be to live those ways healthily for you, or financially healthy or physically healthy, without having to have an actual goal at the end of it. Like, I want to run a 5K or I want to run a 10K. You should just want to look to be fit, healthy and free anyway. Because if the focus is on the goal, so if the focus is on the goal, it takes away from what you should be thinking about.
And I would fully support that. So I think there are two sides to it. I think that there is one around using your examples about the well-being and what your end goal is that it's a lifestyle change. I want to be healthier. I think that you need to understand what you're trying to achieve before you actually put any form of trigger or milestone or anything to it. So I break them into two parts. One is, do you really know? So if I use your example again, Dave, about health and fitness, is I want to run a 5K. Well, actually, the target and the objective is to be healthy. If you can get that, if you get your head around that first, then putting some milestones of how you can evidence that you change that lifestyle, then, and you can put the two together, then you start to actually be able to change your behaviors, change your lifestyle, while having something to achieve as well. And so it's not just the 5K. The 5K is maybe one of the things to start to show that bigger achievement. And I come back into that's your first bite-sized chunk. And your next one might be that you want to go and, I don't know, swim the channel or whatever it is.
Again,
yes. Yeah, that was quite a lot. That's quite a large goal. Don't be trying to do that. That might be a little bit difficult for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's that. And I think that's where I think a lot of the confusion gets in, because I think we'll talk about this. The goal in itself is an objective, is something to aim towards. But actually, what is more valuable, I believe, than the goal is the behaviors that you develop along the way. And that's when I talk about goals being misunderstood, that's the type of thing that I mean. It's the behaviors that you need to develop to stay on track with a particular area of your life that's important to you. So when we talk about, mentioned SMART before, SMART's brilliant for business. It is absolutely brilliant for business goals, SMART goal setting, because of the way it's structured. For personal goals, if SMART was the thing, then we'd all set loads of goals because we'd all have a nice simple model that we can follow. But the bulk of people's brains don't work on the first aspect of SMART, which is the specific. If I say to most of the clients that I work with, what is it you want? The first thing they'll do is tell me what they don't want, because that's how their brain is. But they've got a pain, there's something that they're not happy with, and they don't want this thing. If we try to force them, which I've seen, not in a deliberate way, but if we try to press them to be specific, might be a better way to put it, then they'll either create something that they don't really want to do, but they say, if I want this goal to work, or I want this thing, I have to have something, I have to be specific. So too often people will jump from not focusing on what they don't want and the reason why they don't want it. What's the reason that this pain is causing? To try and get them to focus on something that they want. And what they'll do is, because their brain doesn't work that way, they'll end up creating something that they want, which is not really something that they want. It's something that they think they should put in place because that will help them get to somewhere where they need to go, but they're not really connected to it. And that's one of the challenges with SMART around personal goal setting.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think I'm just going to come back to, I agree to disagree in some senses. Yeah, you quite like that, Dave.
I love it.
In that if you actually understand and you use SMART properly rather than this regimented thing, and you don't matter what tool anybody uses, as long as you are clear on what that looks like, and it doesn't have to have an acronym, it doesn't have to have anything, is if you want if I just use SMART as an example, if you want to be healthier, for me, that is your specific. It's not specific. So people try to make SMART specific by using the S, and that's not how it works. Is when if I've understood that I want to be healthier, then my measures are what makes it specific. But let's not go into SMART training, but understanding, I think to agree, where we both agree under the same concept, is if you really understand what the bigger picture is that you're trying to achieve, whether that's a behavioral change, whether it's a lifestyle change from a personal point of view, if you have that nailed down, then actually finding small things of milestones so that you can show that you're beginning to achieve those. Because every time we achieve something little towards that bigger goal, we get a kick, we get a motivation, we get a success. And, you know, it's a bit like, you know, I want to go to the gym and I want to do this and I want to do that. Actually, the very first thing you've got to do is actually just go and register. And that might just be the thing that kicks. So I think everybody is different. But the key point, yeah, back to Dave's, is what is it do you really want to? Is it a specific target of numbers, etc.? Or is it that lifestyle change? Is it bigger? And therefore, it's about being honest and open with ourselves about what we're trying to achieve.
Yep, I agree.
So shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah, we've got a little question here from John Hind, which I think is probably pertinent to pick up now. He's asking, how do I identify the values driving my goal? Which is probably why people sometimes struggle with SMART, I guess.
Yeah, I think the first thing, John, is because it's an interesting way you've typed the question, just so I want to know I've understood it. How do I identify the values driving my goal? Or how do I identify my values? It's a slightly different thing. So if you look, the values that are driving your goal may not be the values that you recognize as your values, if that makes sense. So as an example, I had a client who valued family, and that was the thing. But what they do, they work long hours, and then over a weekend would go and spend time with their friends because they'd work long hours during the week. But they said they valued family, so they didn't demonstrate the value effectively enough. So I think the easiest answer to that is you spend some time thinking about it. You spend some time actually putting the effort in and think, well, ask yourself the why question. You know, why as a question can have a bit of a bum rap, but actually sometimes it's a really good, nice, direct question, especially if you're asking it of yourself. Why am I setting a goal like this? Why is this goal important for me? What are the things that I want? And I think it's always focused on the outcome, because the outcome will help you identify the values that are driving that outcome. What is it that I want from this, whatever the goal it is you set, and why is that important to me, and what can I do with it?
Yeah, and I'm going to fully support that. And we come back to what is it that you want to achieve? Yeah, whatever that is. And sometimes the hardest question is owning up and accepting and doing some reflection on what actually do, rather than picking a milestone that says, okay, I'm going to run 5K. Actually, that's not really my objective. My objective is I want to be healthier. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that's where sometimes objectives are difficult, because people don't do that piece of work first. So that you picking up on yours, John, is where you've put your values. What is it that you want to? And then do the targets or milestones you're setting. Will they achieve the values that you're asking?
Yeah. And I also think there's this piece on there about motivation, as in away from or toward. And I think if we nip back to the SMART again, that the S being specific is very much a toward motivator. People know the thing that they want. It's okay to start with an away from motivator, if it gets you going. What don't you want? What is it in your life that you're currently fed up with? What is it in your life that you're currently unhappy with that's driving you to look for something different? It's okay to start from there. You want something to get you on the track, to get you moving. Because what you'll find is that the interesting thing with away motivators is when you're moving away from something, you're moving towards something else. You might not know what it is just yet, but if you keep on a certain track, then that clarity will appear.
I mean, one of the things I say about goals is making certain that your goal is real. And I think that we can have a tendency to do, both personally and professionally, is that we can go rushing into what we think is a goal that we want. And when we delve a little bit deeper, that actually isn't the goal that we were trying for. But because we haven't done the thought process of what does that really mean, and I'm going to use the times that we're in at the moment, of course, which we'll come on to, is that sometimes I think that we've got to take a little bit more time and really stop. And as Dave said, you know, what do we want? What don't we want? And doing that work, and certainly in the coaching arena, there's a lot of work done before we get to what does that really look like.
Yeah, and just if I can, Lisa, just before we move on to the next question, there was one mentioned there from Mark where he talked about setting goals is the easy part for him. Accountability is the difficult part. I would look at the attachment and the goals you actually set in there, Mark, and the emotional connection with them. So are they goals or are they things that you would just, wouldn't it be nice if, which is slightly different from goals. So wouldn't it be nice if I was fit enough to run a 5K? Wouldn't it be nice if my business was, you know, turning over X amount? Wouldn't it be nice if that's what they are? Unless you're actually emotionally attached to them, then that makes the accountability part more difficult because you'll get distracted from other things from there. Sorry, Lisa.
Okay, no, that's great. So moving slightly away from the values and the personal goals then, what do you think the differences are between personal and business goals? You mentioned earlier about SMART.
So SMART for me, 100% is excellent for business. And it was actually formulated by a guy called George T. Dorr, and he's the guy who's accredited with coming up with the SMART acronym way back in 1981. And it was all, when he came up with it, it was about helping teams perform more effectively. And those of us who know SMART or have seen SMART goals, it's been adapted so many times over the years. But the original letter A in SMART, which will now most of us will think of as achievable or attainable, was actually assigned to. That was what the A originally stood for. It was someone within the team, and what were the tasks the teams were needed to complete to do, who was assigned to the particular task. And so that's what the A stood for, which is why SMART is brilliant in business, because it gives you a structure to follow that everyone can be on the same page on. And I think one of the other delegates before, I think it was Rich, mentioned about targeting investors and other people having an input on the goals that you need. And he's 100% right. Sometimes in business, the goals aren't always yours personally, because it's what's needed for the organization. And that's the big difference. So I think if I could say, if there was one difference between personal and business, for me, the biggest one is the use of SMART without making this a SMART fest. But it is for me. So I don't know about you.
For me, I mean, that it applies to both, but particularly with personal, it's motivation. Is you're going back to when you're looking at personal goals, when they're business goals, again, a lot of them are agreed or offered by other people that you've got to input into. When they are your personal goals, they are yours. Achieving anything is about how motivated or how positive or how much we want to do it, or where that's it. So I think there's a big difference in our personal goals, because sometimes there are lots of things in our life that are things that are not easy to achieve, whether that's time or money or wherever that sits. So I think sometimes personal goals can be much more difficult and much more flexible. Yeah, much more movable. They're not as locked down as business goals, you know, achieve X, achieve Y. I think personal goals are much more personal types of goals that we have.
Well, that leads us nicely on. There's a comment from Douglas Campbell about the degree of adaptability needed at the moment with goal setting in businesses. So what would you say a business should do at this time when things are so uncertain?
Okay, Dave. I'll go in there first. Yeah, two key ones for me, and I know Dave's got some viewpoints on this. The first one is about flexibility, and that any objectives or targets need to be able to be moved. Yeah, that's the first one, is we need more flexibility. Secondly is that I think we can get very locked down into what is short term. You know, what we know today, you know, what we know to the end of this year, is that whilst we need to be looking at those, we still need to be looking at what happens long term, even though we don't know many things that will have an impact. That's no different to the way that we are normally. Obviously, it's much more movable and versatile at the moment. But for me, long-term goals, but needing to review those long-term goals very regularly. Over to you, Dave, because I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Yes, those of you who know me well know that I like little quirky things that help me memorising, help keep things on track. And one of the things I've discovered, especially if you're in business now, there is so much uncertainty around. So one of the things I would suggest is to try and stay focused on what you actually know. And a nice little model for this is, some of us of a certain age will remember the ex-US Secretary of State, Donald Rumsfeld, back in the day in 2002, giving a press conference around then the conflict in Iraq. And he was asked about what were the next steps for the US government and the US Army were going to take. And he talked about the concept of known knowns. And he said, there's some things that we know. There's some things, some known unknowns, some things we know we don't know. And there are some unknown unknowns, things we don't know, which caused a bit of consternation, even though that as a concept has been around for many, many years. And I think it's a great way to think about your goal setting in business for now. What do you know in your sector? What are the known knowns in whatever sector that you're in that you know are going to stay the same? So that's, if we use estate agents or something as an example, we know people are always going to want to buy houses. That's a known. So we know that as a thing. Maybe a known unknown might be the level of confidence in the market around people now going into we're obviously halfway through a second lockdown period. And the Chancellor talking about furlough moving on till March. So there may be a degree of uncertainty about how confident people are going to be with the jobs and moving forward about how they might want it, or a reduction in their salary through furlough, how they are going to want to be confident enough to go and to look to buy a house. So that might be a known unknown. In other words, we're not sure of the amount of need and desire for new homes, even though a known will be people are always going to want to buy houses. So think about your own sector. And again, with all of this stuff, it takes a bit of effort. You have to sit down and put some effort in and think about, well, what is going on? What do I know? Think about your team that you've got within your organization, or your own key trusted advisors across your sector, and put some work in together and think, well, what do we know about our sector? And make a list of the things that you know, and then make a list of the things that you're uncertain about, the known unknowns. And the other thing I would add to that, and I totally get Sue's point before about you should always have an eye on your longer term goals, because the goal really, the way that you want to be should always be out there. But the way that you look at time frames, I think, is the other important thing. So I would look in this current situation as a long-term goal to be a quarter. What's going to happen in the next quarter? Because things can change so quickly. We don't want to be putting so much investment into a particular set of actions at the moment, where if we have another spike, things could change like that. So for me, use the analogy of the concept of known knowns. What do you know about your sector? About the known unknowns. What are the things where there's a lack of clarity about it? And don't set anything too big in such a short space of time, and think of long term as something like a quarter or something, so you can go from quarter but still have the focus on the main goal.
Can I just add into that, Dave, as well, is that certainly in uncertain times we get very focused, and we get sort of very narrow and into our boundaries of what we look at. And I think that at the moment we need to sort of force ourselves to be able to look wider, because we have a tendency to be looking at the sort of knowns within, using Dave's example, within this quarter, and what we don't look at, we don't take it broad enough, so that we've got the longer term goals, whatever your period is that you've got some sort of slightly wider goals inside of there. But I would, without a doubt, support, whether you are business, whether you are personal, is that it is the time that you need to plan prior to setting your objectives, and ensuring that you've got the full information. And again, in uncertain times, we can get quite narrow within the group of people that we mix with. And, you know, there is a lot of information out there, is to try to get sounding boards and other people before we start setting goals or objectives. Let's make certain that we are having that viewpoint wide enough before we try to set objectives that maybe we haven't put the thought through, and therefore they don't really have much chance to achieve before we start them.
Yeah, and I think I'm liking that to thinking the destination stays the same. The way that you get there might change. So
Correct.
So if I wanted to go from here to Pierhead in Liverpool, there's lots of different ways I could get to there. I could drive, I could walk, I could go down Queen's Drive, I could go down Great Howard Street. They all lead to the Pierhead. I just need to pick a way that fits and works for us in the business that we're in. So what's the thing that works for you?
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave, and to take that forward is to have a secondary route. Yeah, I mean, again, as we would in any objective, and I think somebody commented earlier, is that agility and that flexibility to be able to get to the same goal a different way, sometimes a flick of a finger nowadays, because it's such a moving arena. Agility
is a great word for these times. It's a much better word than the P word. So,
I know you don't like the P word. I don't actually think, Dave, I'm going to hand this back to you. I don't actually people fully understand the difference between the word pivot and agility.
She said the P word.
Let me rephrase that. Not understand, but how they are being used in terms today, because they are being misused in places. Over to you.
Yeah, the way, especially in early lockdown, should we say, everybody was pivoting when they weren't really pivoting. Me running a program online is not pivoting, because I can't meet people face to face. That's just me being agile. That's me adapting to the changes that we were facing. A good example of what somebody pivoting would be a guy that I know who sells promotional products. That's what he does, and brand items and stuff. Well, they went and bought a large shipment of PPE, and moved them PPE and hand sanitizers and stuff. He pivoted. That his business doesn't do that. That's not what his business does. But he saw an opportunity and a gap. You know, how do I make sure that we can still, keep in the game, if you like, and do something different, but that can make a difference? And that's what that was, a pivot. It's completely different. A pivot to me is it's a 360-degree turn of stuff. Making a slight adaptation or change to what you do is not pivoting. That's just being agile and seeing what's going around in your sector. That was just a slight little,
and neither are a good or a bad thing particularly, are they? You know, it's whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Can I just pick that back up and link that back into objectives? Yeah, and I agree, Lisa. There's nothing wrong with either of them. It's understanding what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you have set yourself some objectives and some targets, whatever you choose to call them, and you are going to pivot, then you are going to have to realign big time and reset your objectives and your aims, because you're doing something totally different. If you are being agile, then you don't need to probably reset them, because actually your target or your objective is the same. What you need to do is you need to revisit them and just tweak and change them so that you can pick up the agility, but you are still aiming at the same thing. So the words pivot and agile do make a difference when you want to link them to objective setting. And I think that particularly for us small business owners, where, we're having to keep our staff along with us because they're having their own issues within, changing circumstances, is that we need to be ensuring that we're using the right language, that they understand what we're doing too, because they're the people that help us achieve our targets and our objectives.
Yeah.
Sorry, slightly off tangent there, Lisa, but all linked together.
Good. So Dave, can you talk a little bit about the best way to structure goals, the different ways it could go about that?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a few. Smart, focused for business, and also it's good for personal if that's how your brain works. That's the key thing. If you're good at, once you get given a target and something to aim for, you're good and you can go. So I'm not saying smart shouldn't be used for personal goals, but think about your own personality style. What is it that drives you? And if SMART doesn't work, then have what I call like a foggy vision. So you have and that works great for away from motivated things. So think about, you know what you don't want. You're not sure exactly what that looks like moving forward, but you know it's something like whatever it is. So if it is a weight loss thing, if it is a financial goal, it is a travel or a family goal. And then if you move towards the type of behaviors, this is where behaviors comes in. Think about modeling people who've done the thing that you want to do. What types of behaviors do they often demonstrate, and what can you match? And then look to get support around that. So it could be things like if you did it, fitness is a pretty easy one, especially coming up to December now, where we know there's going to be a few of us on the call who are already worried about the extra poundage we may put on during the month of December and how we're going to get out of that in January, because that's when we all start again. But thinking about what behaviors do you need to be? So is it healthy people look what they eat? So that might be a way for you to think of that behavior. What is it that you eat? And what types of foods do you like? And do some research around the ones that you like that give you the energy that you need. Is it, like Sue mentioned before, it could be a small thing about walking around and going on a milestone and just going walking down the block for the start. So people who are healthy, they get out and do some physical exercise. What type of physical exercise can you make to start with? So have your time frame, and your framework could be SMART, or it could be focused on the behaviors. Whichever one it is, think about your personality type and who you are and what drives you, and tune into that. Because if SMART worked for everyone, we'd all achieve all of our goals, wouldn't we?
From my side, and I'm going to park SMART as well, because SMART doesn't work for everybody, is I'm going to put it into 4 words, really. The first one is know what it is you want to achieve. Put the work in and find out whether it's behaviors, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's a specific project, whereabout is your mindset. Do you really want to do this? And my other key one is that once you've got that, then write it down. Nothing is real while it is staying in our brain. I don't care whether you write it down on a scrappy bit of paper or wherever it is. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves what it was that we were starting out to do in the first place. And, I use bite-sized chunks. This has nothing to do with SMART. This is, I need to clean the garage out. I don't know about you, garages, we put off. And one day it's like, I've really got to do that garage. And then it's a case of, okay, right, I'm just going to make a bite-sized chunk. Next weekend, I'm just going to do half an hour to start, whatever it is. So know what it is, and put a plan together, and a plan that works for you, that you have thought about. Have you got the time to do it? Whose help do you need? All of the stuff that we need in fundamental objectives. And then, give yourself a pat on the back when you've started it. Motivation is a key one for anybody, whether it's business or personal, about goals. And if you can keep your motivation up for whatever it is, then actually following a plan and following a structure is easy. It's allowing yourself to take the positives.
Great, guys. So final question then. What would you say to anyone still struggling to set goals?
The first thing I would do is to check in. I think I mentioned it earlier on, is to check in on their motivation. Are they struggling to set goals because they don't know what goals they want to set? Are they setting goals because they think they have to, because that's what successful people do, but they don't really know which ones they want to be setting around? And look at why they're not setting. If they haven't set goals before, why have they not set any goals? And from a personal perspective, I think for a lot of people that will be based around their level of ability and the level of belief in themselves and their own ability and self-worth. It's a massive stumbling block for people that subconsciously it's like, I'm not deserving of a thing, or this is my life and this is what my life is. So that would be one thing to check in on that.
Bit of self-sabotage.
Oh, definitely. If you don't believe you're capable of these nice things that you want, there'll always just be nice things that you want. I wish I could is a common thing. Wouldn't it be nice if? Well, it would, but do you want them? And do you want them enough to be able to sit down and go and do something with them? And the answer to that might be yes, but actually there might be this blockage that's just there and that you find really difficult to move. And before you can do any of that, you have to move that roadblock out of the way. So you have to put the work. It's mentioned a couple of times, Sue's mentioned before, you have to put work in. It doesn't, whatever the goal is, however you set it, you have to put the work in. Otherwise, they're just nice things.
Yeah, Dave,
that's one of them.
Sorry, Dave.
Go on, bud.
Okay, if I can just pick up on that as well, you know, it really is, I'm going to use the word discipline, actually, you know, the discipline and the buy-in that you have. And I'm going to come back to writing something down. And I've done a lot of coaching on this over the years and training on it. And people go, yeah, I want to do that. And I've got that. And 6 months later, I'm still going to do that. And, you know, a year later is, unless you make it real, I'm going to use the word procrastination. There's always tomorrow. There's always, I don't know, look in the mirror tomorrow. There's always a reason that we can't do that. I understand that that is difficult, and that comes back to our motivation and our buy-in. You can set as many targets and as many objectives as you choose, but if you don't have the discipline to hit the tough times, you know, however, you know, whether it's a work target or a home target, you wouldn't have a target if it wasn't easy. So that means that we have to do quite a lot of work with ourselves and our own self-reflection and our own way to keep ourselves moving in a business world. Hopefully we've got our line managers and people that help support us to encourage us to keep going through the tough times. But in our personal goals, it is really quite easy to go, yeah, it's a bit tough, so I won't go there. So I'm going to, without doubt, with Dave, motivation, certainly on personal ones. What do you really want to do? And also is, don't procrastinate, get on with it.
Yeah.
There's a bit of coaching on there as well.
Do you think that a lack of motivation then with a goal is an indication that perhaps it's the wrong goal and you don't really want it enough? Personal point of view?
Could be. It could be that you want it, but I go back to what I mentioned last time, that you want the goal, but you've got, it's like a ship trying to set sail and it hasn't lifted up the anchor. There's something that's still, whatever it is, and until you do the work on how to lift the anchor, then you're not going to set sail effectively. So you might want the goal, but there's something nagging away at you for a negative limiting belief that is just holding you back. And of course, sometimes I mentioned earlier, it may be a goal that you think you should set because of a particular sector or thing.
Because you've read a top 10 things that every successful person...
Oh, don't get me started on the morning people. Get up at 4:30 and sit in a barrel of freezing cold water for an hour. No, look, that's a way. And if that works for you, crack on and do that. But there's loads of successful people who don't get up till about 8:30, have a nice little coffee, read the papers, and then get stuck into the day. Find one that works for you, I think.
So we've got some good comments and questions popping up, if we can just have a look through those. So Jez has asked, would you recommend reaching out to people that have achieved similar goals, either business or personal, such as a business coach, a personal coach, or a sports coach?
I would, if I pick that up first, Dave, I would always say that if you respect somebody and what they've achieved, and you know, you're willing to have a conversation, without a doubt, doesn't mean to say that you have to do what they've done or anything else, but if it's always, it helps to motivate and keep us positive when we can see that other people have been able to achieve things, and they might just have ideas that we didn't have, and a sounding board in anything is always good.
Yeah, I would get clarity for you on what you want, whether it's a coach or a sounding board or a mentor. There are distinct disciplines amongst all of these things. There's lots of people at I see at the moment on social media putting the word coach next to their name.
Life coach.
Well, yeah, and I'm not wishing to be disrespectful to them, but I know I put a lot of time and effort into my coaching qualifications to learn and understand how to be an effective coach, and because it's an absolute skill. It's not just a thing that because you're good at something or you've done something, it doesn't mean to say you're then going to be good at helping other people do a thing. A classic example is any sport. Sport is littered with fantastic players in that discipline who've tried to then go on and be a coach in the same discipline and have really struggled because it's a completely different thing. So that's the first thing I would say. Find out what you need. You need a coach, you need a sounding board, you need a mentor, someone who's been and done the thing that you want first. So that's what I would, my suggestion on that would be get clear on what you want.
And and also what you're expecting, and that's expectations on both sides to what that relationship is.
Yeah. So Rich Barkley has said, business related, do you find that people set their targets or goals alongside business plans or as a natural element of them? I have 1 to 3, 5 to 10 year plans and review at the end of each period to ascertain if met or not met and why. I'm aware that such plans need to remain flexible, but how often should goals be assessed or reviewed? Quite a few questions in there.
Yes, Rich. We love it, Rich. Go on, Sue.
Well, I'm gonna start at the last one because I can't remember. You know, women of a certain age, I can't remember the first question, so I'm going to start with the last one that turns around and says, how often should you review them? Yeah, if you've got 1 year, 3 year plans, 5 year plans, for me, you should be reviewing them regularly. Putting a time scale on that is because we're all different, but for me, they are really long periods. And what tends to happen is we ignore them until we look at them and go, "Oh, look at that. Should I be doing something?" And I keep talking about bite-sized chunks. Without a doubt, yeah, for me, somebody's got a 1, 3, 5 year plan of where they're trying to go in life. That is fabulous. Yeah. But you need to be they need to be much smaller in the shorter term so that you are checking against getting there in the longer term. So part of the reason people veer off, of which we do, and anybody that's got a 5 year plan, the possibility is, one is you won't take the right route. Using Dave's Liverpool, yeah, you might get there, but it might not take you, it might take you less time, more time, or a totally different route. And our lives and things that happen in our lives change, whether they are business, long-term business or personal goals, is that they should be reviewed. For me, even a scan on a monthly basis that sort of says, where am I in those shorter term? And then maybe on, you know, every few months, how is that fitting to the longer term? Dave, I'm going to pass you to the earlier questions because I've forgotten those.
That's okay. So business related, yeah, I think the business plan comes first because that's the thing, what you want to do, the difference you want to make in the world and who you want to make it to and all of that type of stuff. And then the plans come alongside that, the goals, come alongside that. How do the goals fit into the business plan and help you achieve the goals? Are the steps, the milestones along the way, the things that have to be done to help you achieve what you want to do in the plan. And I like you've got 1, 3, 5, 10 year plans. That's all good. I love, and brings us back to what Sue was talking about. 90-day goal setting, I think, is a really nice tool, especially for business. It's a meet once a quarter. It fits in with a business calendar, and definitely do them little scans along the way. I think the key thing is to have your own little antennae of when you're on track or off track. And just little self-check. So for example, on a daily basis, I know when I'm drifting. I know when I've still got things to do and I've drifted off. Now, that's not about me beating myself up because I'm not a robot. I'm human. So we're all like that. But it's about I'm aware of when I'm not on track. And I think that's a good thing for there.
Can I just follow that up with Dave that says that the words that we haven't, 2 words we haven't used all the way through this is ownership, is that, which is what you're talking about there, really, is that once we have set those goals, we own those goals. Nobody else does, even if other people, from a business point of view, impact on agreeing those goals. If we take personal responsibility and ownership for that goal, then we have a good chance of achieving it. And it's sometimes very difficult to take that ownership.
Yeah. And just on that, to add to that, so I have a bit of a beef in my mind about the word fault. especially in business. If we're talking, we go looking for fault for a thing, or even a personal fault. It's my fault, this thing. See, fault implies blame for me.
Yeah.
And as soon as you say something is somebody's fault, that little 5 or 6, 7-year-old inside them is going to jump up and down and look to defend and look for the reason as to why the thing happened. If we talk about responsibility, that implies ownership. And that's a completely different thing. It's a much more empowering way of looking at things. So we might not get the results that we want, but if we don't look at fault, but we look at responsibility, then ownership, then it makes it easier, I think, to move on from whatever the situation is, to then be able to be able to stay on track with gaining the results that you want out of it.
And just to slightly go off on tangent again, I think personal responsibility is a key point within any objective setting, and maybe can be another session another day, Dave.
Yes.
And I think that's a great place to draw it to a close, guys. I think, because I think there's a few interesting things I've pulled out, really, about being kind to ourselves, knowing what we really want. And I particularly like the known knowns and the unknown knowns, and I'm going to apply that to my own life. So thank you very much, guys. I'm going to launch a quick poll for those who are still here, just to see what topics are of interest in the future. I hope that you've all enjoyed this session. We have got our next webinar scheduled for the 9th of December, which is a riveting tax masterclass with a view on Brexit, specifically by Karen Pearson from Jackson and Green, and Sue will be hosting that session. But I think it will be really quality, and that is moving by the day. So in terms of, you know, the information that she's going to be sharing with everybody. So I think that will be a really useful one for everybody. Thank you for your votes. Managing and motivating your staff seems to be the top contender there. So we will bear that in mind for our new year schedule of webinars. So keep an eye out on our social media, and please feel free to message any of us if you need any more information about what we've been talking about today, about what Dave does, about what we do at Prosper Squared. Please follow us on social media, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, folks.